Everyone to the Fundraising Academy's monthly webinar. Today, our topic is donor stewardship, follow-up that fosters loyalty. And I am very excited to share with you, we have a phenomenal presenter. But before we get into the introduction of our presenter, just want to remind everyone that we're all here for one primary purpose, and that is that we all want to fundraise. We all have phenomenal causes, and now we're going to dive into how to fund it and ways to sustain your organization long term. I have the wonderful honor of being your moderator today. My name is LaShonda Williams, and I'm one of the trainers with Fundraising Academy. I've worked in the nonprofit space for over 20 years, primarily in higher education, and I provide lots of insight from a variety of standpoints, from annual giving, prospect research, and major gifts. But most importantly, I really enjoy training and creating opportunities to share knowledge with individuals like each and every one of you today. Our presenter today is going to absolutely captivate each and every one of you. She is truly an expert in the field, possessing 25 years in the philanthropic space and nonprofit management. Sharon is very passionate about strengthening the ability of philanthropists and also focusing in on mission-driven organizations that strive to achieve results. Her experience is phenomenal. She currently serves as the Vice President of Philanthropy at Leach Tech Foundation, where she leads grant making. She also leads funder partnerships. She trains and provides counsel for nonprofit organizations. In her role, she also is a philanthropic consultant, and she manages projects for Impact Cube, which is a 501c3 nonprofit that was created by Leach Tech Foundation. And the purpose of the Impact Cube is to build and leverage philanthropy as well as social sector capacity. Her experience also includes working with AFP San Diego. She has extensive experience working with the Community Foundation in both Aspen, as well as being a director for the Jewish Family and Children's Services of Pittsburgh. In addition to all of those things, and being a mom and a spouse and a mom dog owner, she also has had time to secure her CFRE. So we know that she's going to share with us not only best practices, but her practical experience in how to leverage these donor relationships to build long-term loyalty. And without any additional ado, I introduce to you the Sharon Goodson, who will captivate us.
My goodness, thank you so much, LaShonda. That's a very kind, generous introduction, and I hope I can live up to the description that you provided. I'm really thrilled to be offering this workshop this morning. I love working with the Fundraising Academy. I've done so for a long time. The team is just top-notch, and the structure, just all really good things. So I can't say enough wonderful things about the Fundraising Academy, and it's always such a thrill to get to interact with colleagues around the country. So, and LaShonda is one of those from, she's in Texas, I'm here in San Diego, North San Diego County, and LaShonda too, she did give you her bio, but she also is an extraordinary instructor and webinar leader, etc. And I really welcome her to share her expertise during this presentation as well. So this actually is one of my favorite workshops to give, because really it is the topics that we're going to be discussing are really the things that I think, as fundraisers and just as people, it comes to many of us very naturally, the strategies that we are going to discuss. What I find with this workshop is it's just a great opportunity to be reminded of those things and to kind of refocus when we're so busy, kind of working all parts of the fundraising continuum to really be sure that we're not forgetting about stewardship. Sometimes it's easy to do that. So during this time together, we are going to explore several things. We've got basically 3 key objectives. We're going to talk about the meaning and benefits of donor retention, some of the reasons that donors stay and reasons that they leave, and the ways that we want to build long-term relationships. And I also know for sure that we have a lot of wisdom on this call. And so we for sure want to hear from you. And we have a couple of spots where we will ask for community sharing, but you are very welcome to enter any ongoing contact or information comments in the chat. I see that we have a couple in the chat as well as the Q&A. So LaShonda is going to be looking at both of those to make sure that we are addressing any questions and comments as they arise. And I am happy to be interrupted also. So, and I think you all know too that this workshop is being recorded, and you all will receive the recording that comes along with the slides. So if you want to share it or other folks take a look, that would be great too. So we're going to start with a community share. And I'd love for you all to think about what are the characteristics of positive relationships, just in general. We're not, for the moment, we're going to put the donors aside. And when you think about relationships that you have with friends, partners, colleagues, what makes it a positive relationship versus a not so positive relationship? And I would love for you to put these even just words in the chat. So to kind of get us started, for me, a good relationship for me is really about communication. When I feel listened to, when I feel like I'm a priority, when I need to be, those kinds of things. So please give a minute and let's see what you all come up with.
We've got some really great responses in here, Sharon, that align with what you're saying. We have a couple of people that have indicated a good listener, being authentic, creating an opportunity to be vulnerable and honest. Open communication is paramount in building trust and loyalty among colleagues, family members. It's multifaceted. Following through, being open-minded. Interest in what we do is very important because we want to be able to develop that linkage. And so these are all wonderful things. And I'm seeing a recurring theme of honesty and transparency in this space. So we've got some really great development professionals on here that definitely are in alignment with all that we'll be talking about today.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And I see David had put when somebody remembers something about me. And I love that because I often feel that people might not remember who I am. I feel like there are some people where I am introducing myself and reintroducing myself, and we've met, and I don't want them to feel badly that they've forgotten me, but it really is something if you really can remember somebody's name and a few things about them at first, so I love that comment as well as all that you are saying. So these are the kinds of things that we want to take with us. That's why I'm saying before that, we know all of this, all of the things that I'm going to talk about. And it's just sort of, again, putting them front and center and, reminding us what we need to do. So, all right, what is donor retention? So very kind of, again, easy to define. Basically, that is the number of donors that continue to give after the first contribution. So it's people who come back, basically for a second date. They want to get to know us more. They want to they want to give again. And well, I don't know, surprisingly or not, I'm always surprised, honestly. Every time I look at this data, I'm always surprised how low the average donor retention rate is. It's only 42.6 So that means that for every 100 donors on average that give to organizations in the US, and this comes out of AFP Global, does a lot of great research along these lines. And so for every 100 donors who give, only around 40 are going to return and do the same next year. And, you know, it's a small number, and what you want to be doing is really making sure that you're doing everything you can to increase your retention rate. You could look at your own rates, and maybe for some of your organizations that percentage is higher, and it very well may be. I know of organizations that have gotten their retention rates up to even the 60-70%, which is incredible. So this is looking at organizations all across the country. So not only is it really disappointing if a donor doesn't give again, but it's also really expensive. So the cost of acquiring new donors can be 50 to 100% more than the funds that they actually give. So it can take you several years to even break even on the funds received versus the dollars that you spend in outreach. And so, and when we're looking at this formula, we're looking at staff time, we're looking at events, we're looking at even your infrastructure, all that it takes to kind of run your machine as it is. And this information comes from Double the Donation as a good resource. So really, by focusing on donor retention, you're going to spend less and raise more. So of course, like, who doesn't want to do that? Okay, so next. As you know, the fundraising, or you might not know, but the Fundraising Academy's sort of key, what's a good way to say this? The model,
key elements or pillars,
Thank you. The pillars, exactly. The model that the Fundraising Academy uses is the cause selling cycle, which is basically split into 3 phases. A phase that, and the cycle really is looking at it, representing all of the steps that it takes to be a good fundraiser. Everything from finding your donors to stewarding, asking for the gift, and then having it all happening again. And regardless of the gift potential, there are certain predictable actions that must be performed, and they're basically the same steps that we see even in a sales cycle that would happen in for-profit businesses. So to give this a little more context, the phase 1 is the work necessary for prospecting and qualifying potential donors. And then you move into, so that's the dark blue. You move into the purple, and that's really your face-to-face time with prospective donors. And then the third phase is everything that you do to make the ask and then steward the gift afterwards. And by stewarding, we're talking about paying attention to the donor, really engaging the donors in your work, and getting them really to be involved with your organization and become advocates for your cause, in addition to supporting you with funding and possibly even, volunteer time as well. What I love about this model is that it's a cycle, it's a continuum. So it's a circle, and it's a circle on purpose, because honestly, you are doing a lot of the same activities over and over again. We are all, I like to say, for the sake of this workshop, we are always stewarding. We are stewarding during the prospecting stage, when we are meeting somebody and we're trying to find commonality. We're stewarding during a presentation. We're stewarding when we're trying to find a good location to meet. All of that is really how you are working to build this relationship. And you're also doing things that, again, will come very naturally. You are smiling, you are enthusiastic during your presentation, you're making good eye contact, you're listening, you're doing a lot of the things that we started to talk about in our first share. LaShonda, do you want to add anything?
Yes, definitely, Sharon. And so, also, when we're thinking about this very same continuum, many of you that may be major gift officers, as you know, you've and become familiar with the donor cycle as well as move management. Similar to moves management and the donor cycle with cost selling cycle, there's constant evolution of change with your engagement with your prospective donors. And for those of you that are major gift and principal gift donors, you will have prospects that are in various phases of the move management. And so with the cost selling cycle, it creates an opportunity for you to have a reminder of the various steps and processes, but at the same time, although they happen in a chronological order, for the purpose of today's session, we want to be mindful that we're focusing on retention. And with retention, that means that we have already secured the gift, we're in the stewardship phase, and we're also reintroducing that relationship in a different way to invite the current donor to become closer for a potential upgrade gift, or at minimum, a secondary year or subsequent gift.
Terrific. Thank you so much. This is why I love presenting with LaShonda, because she has so much experience with major gifts as well, among many other things, but that's always couched in a really productive way. So with stewardship, we know that stewardship fosters loyalty. So in looking again at this model, I want you to consider again, and also reminding that we said earlier, only about 40% or so of the organization, of the donors will come back with a second gift. Let's just think about that for a business, okay? So if you owned a local restaurant and you had customers coming in, would you expect that less than half of the people who came to your restaurant would come back again? I mean, that would be really tough. And restaurants rely on loyal repeat diners in order to survive. And actually, it's one reason why 80% of restaurants fail within the first 5 years, and why so many nonprofits really struggle in the beginning, because it takes a few years to build up build up these relationships and your reputation, and you really building up that patron loyalty. So onward, here we go. Okay. Oh, sorry, I didn't do the stewardship circle. I should have done that earlier. Okay, so next, here we go. Okay, so we're saying, it's all about creating the long-term relationships. And we, so next, we're going to say, so we also had looked at some research, and some of this comes from AFP, some of it comes from donors who I know, and again, I'm guessing that none of this will be really a big surprise. But why do donors stay with us? They stay really, because they trust you. I think that is the number one. As LaShonda mentioned, I work for a very interesting organization that does grant making, and also has a 501c3 public charity, Impact Cubed, for which we do some modest fundraising. Not a lot, but we do some. And so, and my career, I have been on both sides, like constantly, so, but from the foundation hat, I will say that the number one, when ever a donor, anybody, or even a nonprofit, anyone says, what's the number one thing that you look for in a nonprofit? And I would say that, there's a trusting relationship and the leadership. Those are always my top things, especially as we move out of really requiring long or elaborate funding proposals. So much more of it is relationship based, and we're able to do, granting in a way that actually relieves the organizations of a lot of work. And that's because of the trust that we build. So that's the number one thing with donors, in the sense I'm kind of giving you our story about that. So the trust in the organization. They believe also that their donation will have impact. Something good, some better is going to happen as a result of these dollars. And as specific as you can be with this, the better success that you will have. So if you are able to quantify to the extent that it makes sense, and I know there are different, organizations and the different work that you do, but as much as you're able to say how those dollars will translate, better off. They also, going to that third bullet, they care deeply about your cause and your mission. They maybe they followed the same cause for a long time. They have some sort of a personal connection to the cause. Also, they feel appreciated and they feel like their views matter. Somebody's going to listen to them. Not necessarily that they should be giving feedback to, run the place. We do know that there are those donors, and I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that, at least that they can share their views. And we do also know that donors are influenced by their peers. And of course, the tax benefits come up as well. LaShonda, anything you want to add here about why donors stay?
These are all key indicators of why they stay, and they also, they complement what we said in the very beginning about what are some key attributes of healthy relationships and what we're seeking. And in that very same aspect, these are the exact same things that donors are expecting from us. And as development professionals, and as we continue to build and strengthen relationships, it's very important that we keep these types of activities and behaviors top of mind, because we want to be mindful that, in essence, without trust and transparency, the organization will suffer dearly. So it's our responsibility to make sure that we're very, very transparent with our donors and provide back with them with accuracy, and ensuring that their donations are applied in the manner in which they've asked. We do have a question from the audience. And one of the questions in our queue, an individual, Julie, says, how can we scale this so that it applies to all donors at all levels, where you may need to create an illusion of personal treatment without capacity to actually treat them individually, for example, with 60,000 donors. So it sounds like you're trying to figure out a way to impact and touch your donors, the 60,000, so that you can retain them, but also creating some personalization. And Sharon, I will yield to you on some ideas.
No, thank you. And thank you, Julie. That is a really good question. And that's a lot of donors. 60,000 donors is a lot of donors. And in a later slide, we do talk about treating all donors like they are very important people, VIPs. But with 60,000 donors, that's going to be hard to do. What I would suggest doing, and you may already do this, is to think about approaching your donors in different ways, segmenting them by their interests, perhaps, segmenting them, of course, by their giving level. I mean, that would be sort of the natural, but I think if there are, let's just stick with interest for a second. So if you have donors that are, either they support a particular program, and this is why the information that you capture through your database, your data entry can be, is really important, because you could be providing engagement opportunities specifically directed to a given, a given group. So I don't know, 60,000 donors, I'm guessing you might work at a university or a large health system. And so let's say it's a university. And, perhaps by offering different engagement opportunities with different parts of the school, that could allow for more individualization. Now, it may not be possible to do one-on-one, but for instance, if sports are a big deal and you have people who are passionate about the sports of your school, having, even like Zoom calls with the coach, or a given professor, offering different kind of possibilities. And if you're able to capture the information about them, about the donors, then it could even be somewhat personalized invitations to join you for things. Of course, you can only have have personal touches, for so many, but I think you could also be communicating in a bunch of different ways. So you've got the engagement piece, you've got the like the one-on-one engagement events, conversations. They don't all have to be in-person events. In fact, following the pandemic, when there were a lot of donors who said, they really were quite happy getting information via Zoom. And of course, you have those who are desperate to get back into an in-person event. It's really okay to do both. And even a morning coffee with the CEO could be something great, and maybe you get 30 donors. I also like to say that it is, the invitation is as important as the people who attend. Like if you're invited, just that they have the opportunity to be invited is a really big deal. You also have ways that you could communicate, by print, by social media, and also by using a team, and not just your fundraising team, but your board, your again, if it's a university, your students, volunteers. I mean, that's incredibly impactful. And other volunteers, even if it's just a thank you. I was getting something in a I think Debbie Murray from Community Resource Center is with us at this meeting, but I was doing some shopping and I missed a call, but it was from one of her volunteers just thanking me for going to their winter event and telling them that they appreciated me. And that was lovely, made my day. It was such a nice thing. That kind of falls in line. So the invitation along with a message, we may not get people. So, on the phone, and that's really all right. LaShonda, anything you want to add? You work at a university and have worked for large organizations.
Yeah, and working for a university definitely creates the opportunity for you to be prompted to be creative to reach the masses. So I definitely can identify with what you're saying, Julia. A couple of things that come to mind is we're thinking about specifically with the cost selling cycle, and phase one is prospecting and discovery. And so in that initiation of the relationship, making sure that you are creating comprehensive individual profiles for those that are major gift prospects, but then also in the event that your organization has a crowd funded type event where you're getting massive numbers of individuals that are participating in a given campaign, and or just an annual thing that you may want to continue to consider implementing at your organization, is an annual donor relations survey. And with that donor relations survey, that provides the opportunity for donors to provide feedback to you, and it's an opportunity for them to also update their profiles. And that's where you're able to identify those specific areas of interest, ways that they'd like to give, areas and ways that they'd like to become more involved with the organization, the types of events that they'd like to attend, if they'd like to volunteer, and depending on the type of organization. So for like a higher ed institution, for example, you may want to have panelists to come out and have individuals to be speakers, and individuals who are interested in being more engaged in the fundraising aspect. So considering a donor relations survey can be very helpful. And then it also is in alignment with phase one of the cost selling cycle, which is that prospecting and that discovery. And also when you're administering these donor relations surveys, you also want to at least have 2 or 3 open-ended questions so that you can gather some subsequent information from those set donors. And it'll help you with personalizing those touches as you're developing a variety of templates to keep them engaged.
That's great. LaShonda, David had asked a question if we have any examples of donor surveys that we could share.
I can share a donor survey that I've administered online, and later in the presentation, we will share with you how to be in touch with us. So definitely I have some samples that you're more than welcome to take a peek at.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just say too, they don't have to be detailed and elaborate. They really can be, in fact, probably better that they're not, really.
Exactly.
4 or 5 questions. Really, I would want to know basically, why are you involved with us? And how do you like to hear from us? You'll have donors who will say, don't send me, too much stuff, whatever, if there's a way for you to segment and then limit the communications, you can always address that. But I would want to, like, why are you involved with us? How do you want to, be communicated with? There's a better way to say that, but, and what could we be doing better? And would you like to talk? That kind of a thing. So it could be, really as easy as that. The other thing that I often talk about here in San Diego is having some focus groups of donors and that's a great engagement opportunity where you're not asking for money, you're asking for advice, you're asking for their counsel, and bringing together very easily. And you can do this yourself. This doesn't have to be administered by like an outside consultant or anything like that, but you could bring together 6 or 7 donors, and you could do this several times during the course of the year, and for an hour, and do the same kind of thing in person. Have a couple of staff there so that you've got recorders as well. But people love to do that, and you could do it by Zoom too. So it's kind of like all of these things. I also kind of liken it to when you're in a job search, right? You're doing all the same stuff over and over until you get a job. In fundraising, we're doing a lot of the same things over and over until we get the gift, and then we're doing it more. So my metaphor kind of loses it a little at that point, but that's basically the gist of it. Now we're going to talk about the other side, and we kind of started to do this too. And none of this will be a big surprise, but why do donors leave? Number one, they don't think that you need them, and that's a big one. It doesn't even. Not even adding sort of like a subjective, not that they don't like you anymore, but it's more just that, maybe they think you have enough money, or they think that you've got it covered. This often I've seen comes into play when we celebrate large gifts that come in, which is super important to do. And you really want to acknowledge those large gifts. And it can be sensitive because you also, it's not over, and so I have had donors say, oh, well, you got that big gift from so-and-so, I think you're set, well, for instance, if you're a food, an organization that provides meals or bags of food, people have to eat more than once. Educational institutions, they go back to, it's not just a one-time, one and done kind of thing. So that I think really is a communications issue, and to really explain, how the funding helped and, what else, is needed. So really that impact is super duper important, communicating that. And that can be communicated in a lot of different ways, but just to be sure you keep that front of mind. Don't feel appreciated. That is a really big one. They want to feel the love. We all want to feel the love. We're back to what we talked about at the very beginning about ways that we want to be in relationship with people. Then you have, feel that their other organizations are more deserving. We did see this a lot, of course, during the pandemic. The frontline organizations, we're looking, were right there. They were on the front lines, making sure that, the health and safety and a lot of the basic needs of people were met. And I think what happens with some of that is that good partnerships, at least here in San Diego, really interesting partnerships were made with organizations, with frontline or nonprofits as well, so that they could be really, aligned and be working together. So for instance, we had, educational programs that were aligning with food programs, so that, students who were studying at home were able to get, extra help from a tutor, via Zoom or something like that. So anyway, but you want to be careful that you're not ever dissing another cause or another organization. By all means, don't do that. I really do believe that, there are enough resources for everyone. I do think that is the case. And it's a way of how do you get to those? Also, when you kind of come at it where it's going to work out, there are going to be enough resources, it comes through. And, people can kind of tell that you don't have that sort of anxious approach to things. Anyway, so that's that. And then the last is a very realistic one as well. They can no longer afford to contribute. And we know there are other ways, very meaningful ways, that they could be engaged with your organization without providing funding. They scores of volunteer possibilities, introducing to new donors, a lot of different things. So don't give up on them. Also, people's financial situations they're not static. Things do change, and you want to be around as well when things get better. LaShonda, anything you'd like to add?
Exactly what you said, that you want to make sure that you stay connected. And although you may lose touch with the donor because their financial situation may change, you still want to keep them abreast of what's happening, the developments within your organization. Because if they've made one gift or two or even more at some particular point, that means that they are interested in supporting the organization. They would still like to be involved. And should their financial situation change, then if they're receiving ongoing information about your organization, that affords them the opportunity to go ahead and make that gift by staying connected and keeping them informed.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you so much. We got one question saying, for donors, should the priority be to prioritize having a lot of small to mid-sized donors or having a small set of high-level donors? Is there a good medium or middle ground for the percentages? I'm sure LaShonda will have good advice with this. I would say, I think that there has been research that says that something like 80% of the funds that an organization gets in comes from 20% of the sources.
You're spot on.
Is that right? Okay. So that could be donor, that could be an institutional funder, like a foundation, that could be government. So when you are looking, I think, at how you're going to divide your time, that's a really important thing to think about, because there's, only so much of it. You're going to want to, put the energy where the most value is going to happen. And so if you're getting the 80% from just 20%, what is that 20%? And are you doing everything that you can to steward that 20%, even if they are, and what we're saying for basically individual donors is also true for institutional donors. I work for a foundation, and it's always a disappointment when we don't hear from a nonprofit until it comes time to ask for a renewed grant. I get it. I work with a lot of nonprofits. I appreciate very much how busy everybody is, but it's just kind of it's disappointing. It would be nice during the year to hear also how things are going. And it doesn't mean that we won't give another grant, not at all. We're not like that, but a lot of these same kinds of things you want to be doing. LaShonda, what do you think? Because you have a lot of experience in that area.
I would definitely concur with what you said in prioritizing, but then the second part of what I'd like to add to the commentary is also be mindful of what is your overarching goal for your organization. So depending on what that financial goal is, that will determine and drive what your gift table will look like in terms of the number of individuals that you need to have as prospects to give at certain levels in order to achieve that goal. So it's a combination or a mixed approach is what I'd like to call it, that will allow you to kind of create that balance. And with each organization, it varies, but you want to be able to strike the balance. So that's definitely a great question, Stephanie. We appreciate you for adding your insight and furthering our conversation as we're taking a deep dive looking at this donor retention.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. And so I guess you had started to answer Stephanie's question too about if a donor doesn't feel like you've stewarded them the best way. Right. I guess I would also with that, want to ask what should you have done? What would they have wanted? and just to see, is it, because sometimes, and I know this, I've worked with some donors too, where it's often easy, I think it's an easy dismissal. I wasn't stewarded well enough, and that's sort of like, okay, I mean, a lot of our donors are very savvy. They know the lingo. And but when I've had those, and it's happened to me, and I think also just, I think, again, listening to that and really trying to understand what should have been different. What was it that, what would you have liked? Now, if they wanted, and I have worked with a donor like this one comes to mind, who wanted a ton of one-on-one time. She still does, because, years back, I took her on a couple of dates. Now, goes back to I was also with a community foundation before a private foundation. So when I was at the community foundation, over a summer, we called it our summer of visiting all these nonprofits, and then we went out to lunch, and it was a lot of fun, and she loved that, and she wants to keep doing it. Well, there's only so much that, I mean, that took a lot of time, and I don't know, maybe I overdid it, but I think sometimes you could also, so with her, I've been able to say, I wish I could do it again. I really can't, unfortunately I can't, it was a different time or what, whatever. But putting a little bit of a reality check there. And, and then also seeing, and I do see too, where, aligning expectations around the size of a gift and how it's acknowledged. I could see that could be an issue. Well, I gave 5,000, and to me, that's huge. And it is a really generous gift. Why isn't that on the cover of your annual report? I'm being kind of silly here, but, well, we wish we could put everybody at that level on, and what you did was incredibly meaningful. We had to, provide that for, donors over 100,000 or something. I don't know. So I guess kind of just at least having the conversation, at least so they feel listened to. I don't know if there's.
Exactly. And that goes back to why donors leave, because they don't feel like they're listened to. So by listening, that helps create that opportunity. Julie has also chimed in, and I'll chime in on this. Do you like the idea of asking those who can't afford to give at the same level to make a smaller gift just to keep them as an active donor? And what are some best ways to do that? Julie, you're spot on. We're talking about donor retention. All gifts are important. All gifts matter, no matter what size the gift may be. And as Sharon just shared, you may not necessarily be able to steward the individual at the particular level that they may be accustomed to, but we want to demonstrate that we do value their gift and let them know that their gift, no matter what amount, is impactful for furthering your cause.
Exactly. Something else along those lines, you bring up a good point, Julie, is that, it's not, and schools often do this in a great way, is that it's not necessarily the amount of money, but how many years you have been a donor. So I went to a small liberal arts college, and, my gifts now are not big at all, but over the, 30 plus years, I've given a good amount. But what they've done, because they work with, students who are new graduates, et cetera, they'll be like, wow, Sharon, you have given every year for the last 30 years. All right. Like that, there could be other ways to showcase that don't involve, the funding. So that's something else to think about.
And, that's making me think about, I know a lot of people sometimes tend to shy away from giving societies, but there could be a lifetime giving society, which recognizes those individuals that have given consecutive years. And so, having a capstone of what that amount may be or what it may look like, whether it's the number of years or if it's a cumulative total to a certain point, because I've been with an organization that recognizes lifetime giving of individuals that have given X amount of dollars, and it doesn't matter what the time frame has been. But once you've achieved that level, then you're always a part of that society, and you keep them involved. So that's another way to keep them engaged, and it also is another way to retain them as a long-term donor, even if their financial situation may change.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. Thanks for these great questions too, everybody. Terrific. We're going to move on a little bit, and to also just re-emphasize when we talk about the cause selling cycle, a lot of this information on this slide is what you're going to hopefully be collecting during that phase one, where you're going to learn about your donors' education, profession, spouses, partner, all of these kinds of things, their pets, interests. And you're going to record this in your donor database. You always want to be asking about parts of their background at every meeting. You don't have to ask the same information, of course, but just to be learning more about them. In fact, I'll go back to the pandemic. I think it was, it's just like such a noteworthy experience for all of us, of course, was, asking donors, especially, senior donors of, what does this feel like? You've lived through other challenging times in history. How does this compare? And to be honest, a lot of the answers, thinking about one donor, really made me instilled a lot of confidence that, we'll get through that. We got through that. We'll get through this too. So even from a personal point, personal take, I found a lot of comfort in those kinds of conversations. So, but you want to be asking this information, tracking the data. What I try to do is after meetings, before I get any further with the other 20 things that I know I need to do, whether it's sitting in the car after a meeting or, if I'm in the office, whatever, jotting those notes down before I forget them, and tracking everything that I can. And then, of course, also sending a thank you note after the meeting. And it could also be a note after the conversation as well. It doesn't have to be an in-person meeting. But I'd like just to think for a little bit, and if you'd like, you can put it in the chat of, what kind of donor data are you capturing? And then how and when are you reviewing it? So that's another thing, is that at least I know with us, sometimes we're really good about putting the data in, and then we don't really look at it that much. They were kind of like, okay, we're on to the next thing. We know what we're doing, but, how should we be, we probably should be reviewing that more and trying to come up with more, different linkages and doing that at least, a couple times a year. Maybe you could put some ideas in the chat, and LaShonda too, if you want to add anything.
I would say that, when you're thinking about the various types of data that you want to review, and this goes back to your thank you messages and everything that we're talking about as it relates to donor retention, segmenting your data according to anniversary gift dates. That first anniversary gift date is an opportunity for a touch point, whether the donor is a current donor, a lapsed donor, a live bunt, or a side bunt, but that is a touch point to remind them of their initial affiliation with your organization. And it's also an opportunity to provide them an update with the importance of their giving and how much your organization has grown as a result of of their support. So that's just my tidbit on that particular slide. So getting to know your donors, it's paramount to maintain that relationship.
Mm-hmm. Right. Great. Yes, and actually Amanda put a very good point that I was going to mention, and you beat me to it, but which is terrific, is keeping in mind privacy and ethical standards regarding their information. So no need to put stuff that could be embarrassing, could be really, confidential to the point that they don't want others to know. And to treat the data as if, you're not the only one who's going to be looking at this data. I guess that's where I want to go with that, where may you be in your positions for a long time, but we know that transitions are going to happen, and you want to be able to, have a good feeling about the data that you've collected is fine to pass on to somebody else. So yeah, when it's going to make, if it's going to embarrass the donor, or if it's going to, I don't want to say it's not public information, but anything along those lines, I agree, be very careful about that.
And the rule of thumb is simply do not record anything in a donor's profile that you would not be comfortable with them reading that you have written.
That's right. Very good point. That's a super good point. Great. Okay. So let us continue. As you're asking about, them, and this is a little bit to some of the information we were talking about for the surveys and the focus groups is, asking about, their giving, like why our cause, why, it could be really interesting of like, and what prompted your first gift, hearing so often, donors will have, or we all do, a personal connection to why we're giving to something. And I'm sure you all have some wonderful stories around that. Well, those are a really big deal, and also could be something you might want to use for a communications piece if the donor allows it, approves. But I grew up, I was raised by a single parent, my mom, and so I really have an affinity to groups that are working with kids from single parent households. Um, and um, and also, let's see, this is might be too much information, but so when my parents divorced, it was very chaotic. And I also, so it pains me to think of other children going through something like that. So I have, as a result, supported organizations that address those kinds of issues. Those are the kinds of things that are great, to learn about. Along the lines too of like, why do you keep giving? And this other that, how, when, why would you like to, when would you like to, or how, what, when, and what, how, and when would you like to hear from us? So, LaShonda, anything you want to add?
Those are all essentials. And just kind of going back to phase one, this is the phase one of the cost selling cycle. It's that discovery phase. It's collecting all of that information. And thank you, Judy, for sharing in the chat how much you love to ask those types of questions, because those types of questions create a foundation for a strong relationship. As shared earlier, donors want to know that you remember them, and we won't remember them unless we ask these open-ended, meaningful questions, which create a strong foundation for a very strong long-term relationship.
Exactly. So now we're going to do another community share. And this is going back to, we know there's a lot of wisdom in the room, and we would love for you to share what are your favorite stewardship practices. So if you would tell us in the chat how you like to steward donors, we would love it.
All right, we've already got a couple of responses. Marcus is sharing that he likes to do listening tours to get into the face-to-face mode, which is fantastic. In the world that we live in post-COVID, a lot of people are really wanting to reacclimate and have that one-on-one and have those experiences beyond the virtual space. So that's always a great way. Thinking of an email with the program date or success. I work for scouting. This is what David says, and I enjoy walking tours around the campus. There's nothing like a great campus tour, whether you're a university or a standalone nonprofit that provides services, to be able to demonstrate the impact of the gifts and how they really help the organization strive and thrive to move forward. Include food on the tour. There's nothing like a great snack. And Ellen shares that she personalizes every donation and acknowledgement regardless of the amount and frequency. And that is an excellent practice to do. Depending on what software you're using, you can create template style letters that allow you to filter that information in via Excel and or MailMerge. Monthly donor newsletters for our philanthropic donors, sharing upcoming donor events and experiences at the organization. Thank you, Stephanie, for sharing. And then we also have Mimi that says, I drop off seedlings for people's gardens. I love garden, yes, because that's a constant reminder of your organization. Way to go. Judy says, for every acknowledgement, we send out letters. We change them out every month and let them know about the programming, the youth that they serve, as well as sometimes with staff updates. And it gives them an opportunity to feel connected, which is great, because our overarching goal is to demonstrate linkage so that we can continue to garner philanthropic support for our organizations.
Wow, we have some great things and great stewardship practices in the chat. I mean, in fact, I'm going to go to the next slide. And you've said a lot of these things, opportunities to see the work in action, or to be in the place where the work happens, to be in I think the Hamilton quote, be in the room where it's happening. I don't know, I'm forgetting the second part of that, but where decisions are made. But basically, immersive activities, when you can have donors actually be involved in what you are doing, are incredibly powerful. That's why that, giving, during or after events, galas, the opportunity for giving is very high. With, the camping, having donors visit, having them interact, again, to the extent that it is appropriate, with staff, volunteers, beneficiaries, having them hear of, why the funding has been important, and that they can understand the impact of their gifts. One thing I would be careful about here, I can't help but just mention that if you are going to have beneficiaries, talk with donors, just be very sensitive to how you position those, presentations. That I guess I'm always just very careful, or just want to be careful that enough respect and acknowledgement in very positive ways, are given to the people who are going to be talking. So it doesn't I don't know, I call it like sort of reach out and touch a poor person. I know that sounds pretty crass, but that, you want, these are, you're helping people but that your beneficiaries are the same as you and me. They have had difficulties, let's say, and you've helped address those needs. Any of us could be in the same position. I would just be very, very careful about that. And having them also tell their story, but couch it in a way that proves their success. My friend Debbie Murray from Community Resource Center, I'll just use that organization again. At their winter event, they had a prior client, and they help mostly women who have been victims of domestic violence, partner abuse. And they had somebody who had been in that situation, and she's much more than a victim. She overcame that. She told her story. It was very successful. And so it wasn't like the whole part of all of it. She, and I think even at this point, she's even a donor now to the organization, if I'm getting that all right. So that's the kind of thing I would be, careful as you do that. Maybe you all know that already. I just almost can't help but mention. LaShonda, anything you'd like to add?
You're spot on. We want to share stories of inspiration and storytell with dignity. And that ensures that you maintain the integrity of the organization and is also mindful and respectful of those said beneficiaries.
Right. Great. Okay, so more about retention tips. Okay, so thinking like a donor, and we've been kind of talking about this during this whole session of, again, and many of us, I think probably all of us are donors. I would like to venture to say, how do you like to be treated? That's what you want to go back. I think we've kind of said that quite a bit. Saying thank you like you mean it. This one always makes me laugh, because I always think of when I was a kid, and I would have a fight with my sister, and my mom would, say you're sorry. And then she didn't really want it to just be like, sorry, it was sort of like, say you're sorry, like you mean it, like you mean it. So it's like, thank you really with sincerity. And I think what we're really trying here is having it be more than just a thank you in the words, really, again, going back to what we've said of having the impact, why it mattered. And again, treating everybody like a VIP. Everybody matters, really trying to listen as best you can and give donors the space that they want and that they deserve, to, again, to the extent that you're able. Back to Julie, I think with the 60,000 donors, that's a bit of a trick, but otherwise that is something. LaShonda, any other retention tips you want to share?
I would like to touch on one thing that we've not discussed that does impact retention and also impacts stewardship, especially when we're talking about larger numbers of individual donors. And that is AI. Now, we know that AI is here. It's not going away. It can be a very effective tool when we use it properly. And I just want to remind each and every one of you that are on the webinar today, if you in fact opt to use some of the artificial intelligence options, to please be mindful that you definitely want to go back and reread and curtail and create an opportunity for some personalization. Because at the end of the day, when we're talking about fundraising, the heart of fundraising is relationships. And individuals want to know that you know them. And there are some, some supplements that AI can help in terms of being able to reach massive numbers. But then we really want that personal touch, especially for those individuals that you are trying to retain and keep close to your organization. So with treating everyone with as a VIP and mass numbers, if you're thinking about AI, please make sure you review the content and that you still scale it down and create some personal elements.
That's great. And Min had put a note in the chat about having trouble conveying, I think, the gratitude that you feel in the thank you notes. So of course you feel a huge amount of gratitude, but I guess, sometimes it just feels a little bit like rote, maybe, if I'm thinking that right. And I would say, Mim, it seems like you do a really good job. I mean, by offering to, by bringing seedlings and by offering, gardening suggestions. I mean,
That's wonderful. Like,
yeah, I mean, that is
to be donated to you.
Seriously. I mean, I think that is a really big deal. I think too, maybe it just feels like, there are only so many words to say thank you. I'm grateful, I appreciate, etc. That's okay. You can really, say thank you. I think really what we're after there is just to, again, show the impact. And I think too that you can share thank yous in different ways. You can share thank yous on social media if a donor is going to be okay with that. You can, do your personal thank yous. You have events.
And then videos, like, there's software out there. Everyone has a Droid or an iPhone, and those simple, basic, thank you so much, Sharon, for your gift to the American Lung Association. Because of you, we can take a deep breath knowing that we have support for this year. I literally just said that off the cuff, just simple and sweet, a nice little video message, whether it comes from you or perhaps you may have someone that is in your development office that's in a higher position, and kind of depending on the gift level will determine who the individual would be that would send that video message. So there are a variety of different ways. And there's also software that can help with developing notes that appear to be written in script, but it's not your script, which is a time saver. And then you can also add, additional post-it note messaging. For example, if you know that Sharon has a dog and, you see something that just happened with dogs, the type of dog she has, thank you so much for your last gift. I just saw this article in the mail about on the email about dogs, and just that one thing that says thank you, but it also reminds her that something personal about her to keep her connected to you and to keep that relationship going.
Exactly. And you're thinking of them. I think Jesse had put that point earlier of, I'm thinking about you. I think also texts are great, again, for the right donors, of just, there are donors who prefer text to email for sure. I mean, that's, something else you may note if you know that, but, that's great too. A link to an article, anything that as well.
And then just simply asking them, like, what are your preferences in, with demonstration of gratitude, or just simply, what was your best stewardship experience and tell me why you enjoyed it. And that way you can get insight from them, and it takes the guesswork out of it.
That's right. I think that, there's often that debate of, should we give donors presents? Give them, like they
Swaskis for you, a swaski for me.
Right, exactly. And I think many of us have, had the donors that, they're giving you these funds and they want it to go to the people, to the cause. They want it to further the cause. If you are thanking them in a meaningful way, you really don't have to worry too much about the gifts, about the tchotchke, the mug, the whatever. It's nice though, to have a reminder of your organization, and those kinds of things. But, you know, I don't think it's as important as we might think.
David, I want to acknowledge what he just said in the chat. He was driving on vacation and he saw the donor's name on a road. And so he called him to let them know he was thinking about them. Excellent. And one thing that I've done as well is I've taken pictures of the road sign and sent it to them like, hey, this made me think about you. How are you? That is an exceptional personal touch in my humble opinion. So yeah, those types of creative things definitely work.
Absolutely. That's huge. Okay, one more slide, I think, with content. We've been talking about this as well. I just love this slide because I mean the 4 Ps, and this comes out of the Fundraising Academy curriculum of, with your follow-up being prompt. So, I've had conversations with folks about that too, of, how quickly should you send the letter? My feeling is as soon as possible, even if it's not the formal letter, but you can leave a message even within a day or two of getting a gift, and how much you appreciate it, a text, something like that, even just saying the formal acknowledgement is on the way. Of course, this may not be possible for the 60,000 donor organizations, but something quick, even again, as I said, if it's not the formal letter. The passion, the positive, really making sure, having examples, having those stories. We haven't really talked much about stories, but examples of, how, well, I guess we kind of have talked about stories, but, examples of the impact that are, from a personal nature. LaShonda, anything you want to add to this 4 Ps?
The 4 Ps are paramount. Keep them in your toolkit because they definitely will help you as you are focusing on donor retention. Those are the prime for me. The 4 Ps are prime.
That's great. There's another P.
Exactly.
So, yes. So we have been taking questions, but if there are any others, we are happy to entertain those now.
I see a question from Lindsay, and I may need a little bit of clarification here. She says she's fairly new in stewarding potential donors. And is there a list of organizations that she can begin contacting? So if you're seeking organizations for information or support, I would say, contact your local AFP, because, becoming affiliated with AFP creates an opportunity for networking with individuals that are in the profession with a variety of experience levels and in a variety of areas of practice. So that would help you with creating a toolkit in preparation for stewarding. There's also conferences for stewardship professionals and an association specifically for those that are working in stewardship. But we also want to remind you that we have the Fundraising Academies portal, which offers a variety of free supplemental trainings and webinars that are made available to you.
Great. Well, why don't I'm going to go over to our summary slide and just to reiterate the sort of 5 or so key points that we talked about. So we've said it so much that sometimes on these summary slides, I almost feel badly saying it again, but okay. We really talked about the importance of building those long-term donor relationships and all that is involved in creating a positive relationship. We also discussed reducing attrition, really getting donors to stick with you by understanding why they stay. And so we talked about asking about that in conversations, in surveys, in focus groups, and recording that information so that you could reference it again in the future. We talked about saying thank you like you mean it, with the passion and the examples of what the gift meant to you, and saying thank you in multiple ways. We talked about thinking like a donor, and wanting to be sure that you know, kind of that do unto others as you would want to have done to you. That's the trick here. And last is making a plan and following it. So, you know, a lot of these things are, you know, they sound great, and they are great. They're, you know, important strategies, but definitely important that you carve out some time to think about how you're going to do that, and then follow through. You don't have to do all of these. You know, I always am leery, you know, that I don't want anybody leaving these, you know, a session like this and thinking, oh my gosh, we have so much to do. It's all a work in progress. None of us do all of this perfectly. What we want to give you are just some, you know, important kernels to think about, so that you can talk with your teams, and or if you're a small organization and it's you just do some, you know, contemplating, and think about a couple of strategies that you're going to implement to make this happen.
Right. And setting realistic goals is very important. Thinking about the resources that are made available to your organization. When we're talking about resources, we mean the time available, the personnel available, as well as the finances. So you have to think about all three and then set your priorities accordingly. Sharon, we have one final question here in the Q&A that came from an anonymous participant today, and it says, can you please provide clarity in the definitions of cultivation and stewardship? We have members of our team who use the words interchangeably, and it's confusing, and it should be anonymous.
It is. You are completely right. I agree. In a lot of ways, they are essentially the same thing, I would say. I've used cultivate, or I've seen cultivate used more when it's a new donor, you know, or a new relationship, as like sort of cultivating and growing in that way. Stewarding, I've seen more used as like an existing donor, and you're you know, kind of stewarding that along. But for the most part, it's, I think, essentially the same thing. LaShonda, do you have?
I concur with you from the standpoint of, with cultivation, when you're thinking about the initial donor cycle and you're beginning the relationship, cultivation is that opportunity where you're learning more, you're garnering more information, you're building the relationship. Whereas with stewardship, you have solidified the relationship, you have made the solicitation, you've secured the gift, and you are stewarding to maintain the relationship. However, in the instance of thinking about donor retention and upgrade giving, you may have to do subsequent cultivation, meaning that you're going to take a deeper dive into the relationship with that particular donor, identifying what are some additional areas that he or she would like to impact, other passions that may have transpired over the life of their giving. So it depends on where you are in the cycle. Early on, we mentioned how when you have your portfolio, how each individual will be at a different phase within your portfolio. In that same sense is what we're thinking about with cultivation and stewardship. Cultivation on the front end with that initial gift, transitioning into stewardship. After that gift has been given, when you're trying to continue to reinvestment, you're stewarding, and you're also cultivating to identify additional ways and areas of interest for that donor. So think of it as the continuum that Sharon described early on in the webinar.
Thank you so much. Okay. Now I turn it over to, I think let's see.
Yeah, you're spot on.
Okay.
We definitely want you to stay connected with us, and thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, which talked about building donor loyalty, which is very important. Donor retention is essential for our organizations. Please make sure that you follow us on our various social media platforms, and you can also connect with Sharon and myself via LinkedIn. And I think David had a question about some sample surveys, and I'm happy to email you there. I'm definitely on LinkedIn, as is Sharon. But before you go, we have one final slide we'd like to share with you about the Fundraising Academy and what we've got coming up next. And that is Cultivate. You just asked the question about cultivation and the difference between cultivation and stewardship. We'll learn more. 2024 Cultivate, that is sponsored by the Fundraising Academy. We will be hosting you in sunny San Diego, May 2nd and 3rd. and it will be at National University at our Spectrum campus. We hope that you can join us for more information about registration, which is still open, and you definitely want to try to get that early bird registration. Please use the QR code that's listed available. We hope to see you again in this virtual space, but moreover, we hope that you join us for Cultivate 2024 as we cultivate knowledge, relationships, and impact. Thank you, Sharon, so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
Thank you. Oh,
And thank each and every one of you for joining us. For more information about the Fundraising Academy, please visit our online portal to access additional webinars that are free of charge to you. Log in to learn more about the cause selling cycle and how you can further your cause. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we hope to see you again in this virtual space.
thank you
Thank
so
you again,
much.
Sharon.
Take care. Bye-bye.